There are some serial killers. They love forests, silence, isolation, places where no one can hear a scream. Australia's endless wilderness is filled with campers, backpackers, and young people chasing a dream of freedom. And in the early 1990s, there was a man hiding inside that freedom. By day, an ordinary road worker. In his spare time, he rode motorcycles, drove off-road vehicles, and went hunting. No one knew his idea of hunting wasn't limited to four-legged animals. His name was Ivan Milat, but the world would come to know him by another name: the backpacker serial killer. It all began in a forest. In 1992, hikers in Belanglo State Forest near Sydney found the bodies of two women. They were young tourists. These backpackers were last seen hitchhiking. The autopsy reports didn't point to an ordinary murder: sexual assault, multiple gunshots, and stab wounds. The forest had turned into a graveyard. When the search expanded, new graves were found. Missing Australian youths, German tourists, hitchhiking again, Belanglo again. Some had been tied up, some had been shot, and some had been stabbed again and again. One victim had been shot repeatedly in the head. Another showed just how far the brutality went. Now the police were sure this wasn't a coincidence. A serial killer was roaming the heart of Australia. The victims had one clear thing in common. They were young, they were backpackers, they were hitchhiking. Ivan Milat's greatest advantage was trust. A silver four-wheel drive, an ordinary man. He introduced himself as Bill, and then Ivan Milat stopped the car on a forest road, pulled out a gun, and said, "This is a robbery." Another victim had lived through it and survived. That victim's name was Paul Onions. Through the gunfire, Paul managed to run into the forest. Bullets passed right by his head, but he got away. Years later, when he saw the murder reports on TV, he remembered the face of the backpacker killer, the killer's mustache, the killer's stare. And he went to the police. That was the turning point. Police began combing through old files, sexual assault allegations dating back to the 1970s, the nickname Bill, and other evidence. Everything pointed to Ivan Milat, the backpacker killer. In 1994, his home was raided. The weapons found in his home, camping gear belonging to victims, and other evidence linked to the murders. The remaining pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The trial lasted for months. The defense pointed to other suspects, even the backpacker killer's brothers, his own brothers. But the jury wasn't convinced. Ivan Milat was found guilty of 7 murders. He received 7 life sentences, and an additional sentence for Paul Onions, who had escaped. But even the judge said, it seems inevitable that he was not alone in this crime. Years later, the backpacker killer would say something similar in a high court. I wasn't alone, but no one else was ever tried. While in prison, Ivan Milat tried to escape, but he failed. Later, he attempted suicide, but he failed at that too. He went on a hunger strike. It changed nothing. Authorities believed it didn't stop at 7 murders. Disappearances going back to the 1970s. Women from the Newcastle area, tourists from Europe and Japan. Maybe Belanglo Forest was only what we could see. Maybe the number was far higher. Ivan Milat, also known as the backpacker serial killer, is remembered as one of the most feared killers in modern Australian history. But what truly made him terrifying wasn't the brutality. It was that he could hide inside nature. For a backpacker, the forest means freedom, but for Ivan Milat, it was hunting ground. And anyone who walks through Belanglo Forest today knows that some trees don't just give shade, some keep secrets,